last child of 13 children. He grew up, he was born in 1925, and he grew up just before the war. And actually, anyway, just to give you a little bit of background, he was drafted in 1943 or 44, went to training, then showed up in 1945 for service to go to war. And he went to the recruitment office where they were going to be brought wherever. And they stayed there for 3 days, him and 3 friends. The war was over. This was June 6, 1945. The war was over, but they didn't want to leave because I said, well, why didn't you guys leave? Because, well, nobody could tell you anything. And we didn't believe them that the war was over. You know, nobody had a radio. I mean, he said, it was one radio in it. Anyway. So from there began his quest, really. He was always, he was in service with a contessa, because his older sisters were in service, they were maids, whatever, for this rich family, the Maria Pellegrini. He always used to speak about her. And they got my father a job in the kitchen as a kitchen helper. And he was there for a while. And he loved it. He absolutely loved it. From there, basically, his brother-in-law and my uncle, my mother's uncle, they met in Minnewanka in the mines. They were working together. And through pictures, he said, well, look, I have a niece for you. And then, the brother-in-law said, well, I got a brother-in-law for you. And they showed each other pictures, and my parents met through pictures.
There you go.
And then in 1953, I believe, my father came, and my grandfather was here. And then they started talking, of course, and then they brought my mother in. And in 1955, they were married. My mother worked, my father was supposed to work, he was supposed to come to Canada as a first cook for the Palliser Hotel. That was his dream. And the Palliser Hotel back then was paying 65 cents an hour. And of course, his brother-in-law paid the trip because they were poor, they had no money. He paid the trip to come, from Italy to Canada, and he had to pay him back. So his brother-in-law was working for the city of Calgary. So he got him a job. The very next day, when he came from Italy, he started working with the city. Because his brother-in-law's rationale was, well, you work for the city, was paying $1.35, a lot more, double, than what the Palliser was paying for a first cook. He said, work, pay me back, and then you can go work at the Palliser. Well, he never did go to the Palliser. He worked in the city of Calgary in the waterworks department for 23 years. And he hated every second of it. And he used to tell me, and he hated Canada because it was so cold. Anyway, of course, then I came along, I was born, I was the firstborn. And my parents, my mother worked in restaurants. She worked at the Palliser. She worked at City Hall and the cafeterias. And then she got a job with Phil Steakhouse. Well, she did a few stints with the Summit Hotel. There used to be a hotel in Calgary. And she worked various jobs, but always in the kitchen. My father, still with the city, but I remember growing up, every Sunday was always a special meal. He would create, that's where I got to eat, as a Canadian kid, because I grew up, excuse me, in Canada, but I got to, I was exposed to rabbit and, all these weird dishes. Like some of my friends would come over and say, what the heck is this, Then they'd taste it and they'd love it. So every Sunday for us was always a big meal. He would invite whoever, family, friends, and it was almost every Sunday, almost. Anyway, make a long story short, a few people asked him to cook for different events for them, smaller events. And my father, of course, and he dragged me along, And his the same brother-in-law who had brought him here, got him the job at the Palliser, which he never had, started telling him, so, well, why are you still at the city? Why don't you open a restaurant? Why don't you, you know? So my father said, okay, yeah, let's, but he said, well, let's try catering. So from there, Roma Catering grew, or was born.
What year?
Well, they started around 1967 doing smaller functions.
Yeah.
But really, the business didn't take off till 1969.
Okay. Tell me, Carlo, what you have now as part of Roma Catering.
What we have now we have we're at the Italian Club, the Cantina. We have a deli and a commissary kitchen. Okay. We have the police, we're a police cafeteria, and we're always looking into different ventures. And up to COVID, we had the downtown, the Metropolitan Center, but we had to close that because of COVID, because there's no more banquets. But the company has survived these last 2 years with COVID, just barely.
Tell me a little bit about why you think you've been so successful over the years.
I think early on, my father instilled in me the joy and the love of cooking, the love to be with people and creating dishes and making people happy. My father always used to say, don't worry about the money. The money will come if you're happy with what you're doing. He says, I don't care what you do. Do it and do it properly and do it because you love it. And I think that kind of translated to me, because for his love of cooking and his love of being with people was infectious. I mean, I grew up in the catering company, in the catering business, and I hated it because it's a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
you know. And after a while, I think I started to realize, well, my father said to me, because I wanted to be a policeman, RCMP. Anyway, and my son is an RCMP, which, is kind of funny. But my father said to me, give me 2 years. Give me 2 years of your time. I was about 18. He says, you know what you're doing. You like to cook. Just give me 2 years. After those 2 years, if you don't want to stay with the company, you can leave. I said, okay. In those 2 years, I went to SAIT. I took the cooking program. I worked in various hotels, various restaurants. Well, it extended after the 2 years, because after 2 years, I said, well, I don't think I want to be a cop anymore. I want to stay with the business because I really enjoyed it. I loved it. Okay? I loved the hard work. It got to me after, I think it was, maybe I was born with it, I don't know. But I loved the hard work. I didn't mind the hours, and basically I loved the business. And it was a family business, so there was a connection. So I said, okay, I'm here. Then, of course, I got married, and the rest is history, really, because I grew up into the company, and then I also, I'd like to say I made it better. I didn't really make it better. I just extended what my parents were doing, because then, of course, my mother working in the restaurants, she joined my father, and they worked together. I remember the first big banquet they did. I don't know how old, but anyway, my uncle, he was going to university. He's a teacher. He was a teacher, and he had the Italian club where they were speaking Italian. Anyway, long story short, they had about 100 people or 150 people. And this was a big banquet back then for my parents. And they cooked the food, but instead of 150, I think 200 and something showed up. And they ran out of food, and we had to go get Kentucky Fried Chicken to feed the rest of the people. And my father said, if I have to do this, I don't want to cook anymore, And even my mother said, you know what, it's just too much, Anyway. But slowly, after doing baptisms and communions and weddings, and then we started to get into the bigger functions. And it just evolved from there. And then we came to the Italian club. We were working at the Italian club, and the first, I think the first really large function that we did was the Italian Sportsman Dinner. When it was in its infancy, really. I think that was about 400 people. And then we started to get the dynamics of it, and we got a lot of good people to work with us, and just evolved from there.
All right, super. Thanks, Carlo, for joining us today.
Thanks, Mario.
All right, super. That was Carlo Cecchetto, owner of Roma Catering. This has been Business Spotlight with Mario Toneguzzi. Thanks for joining us today.